Hey guys, it's Chris at Highline Guitars, and you're watching another episode of From the Luthier's Workbench. If you like to build or repair guitars, I suggest you click that subscribe button down below, and you'll become part of a community of fellow luthiers. And together, we can take your skills to a whole new level. If you'd like to support my guitar building YouTube channel, visit eguitarplans.com and buy a plan. A link is in the description below. Now on with the video. In this episode, I'm going to be covering part 13 of the Highline Echo Laminated Top guitar build. Now in the last episode, I had buffed out the clear coat finish, and that means that for this episode, I should be starting the final assembly. However, I want to pump the brakes because there's a subject I want to cover which I should have covered earlier on, but didn't. At any rate, what I want to talk about is component selection. Not so much about the brand names and where to buy the products and that sort of thing. I really want to cover what I consider to be the most important aspect of component selection, and that is the timing. When do you purchase these components? Because that can play a critical role in whether or not your guitar is actually going to function properly. Now, what I've said before in previous videos is that you should acquire everything, all of your parts, all of the materials before you start to cut, carve, and sand. Really, you need to have all this stuff right at that point between when you've designed the guitar and when you actually start to build. And the reason for this is because you need to be able to measure dimensions from each of the parts that you purchase in order to ensure that the design you've come up with is actually going to work. Let me give you a couple of examples. Probably the most important has to do with bridge selection. And the reason why that's so important is because the type of bridge that you purchase is going to play an important role in determining how deep you need to make the pocket for your neck. And I'll try to explain this in as simple terms as possible. The way I determine neck pocket depth is I measure the overall heel of the neck. So obviously I have to make the neck first. And that measurement comes from the bottom of the heel all the way to the top of the fret wire. I'll take that measurement, set it aside. Then I'll take my calipers and I will measure the dimension between the bottom of the bridge and the bottom of where the string will come in contact with the bridge saddle when the saddles are in their lowest position. So really what you're getting is the distance between the bottom of the string and the top of the body of the guitar right at the bridge. I'll take that number and I'll subtract it from the overall thickness of my neck heel, and that tells me how deep I need to make the pocket. What I end up with is when the bridge is installed and the saddles are in their lowest position, the bottom of the string is just kissing the top of the frets on the neck. From there, I can raise the saddles to achieve pretty much whatever string action I want to get. Also, knowing that measurement can help determine whether or not you need to angle your neck. Now, typically with a hardtail bridge like this, I can keep the neck flat, but with a taller bridge, like a two-pneumatic bridge, you need to angle it to lower the nut to bring the strings down in order to get the action low enough. So obviously, it's a good idea to have all these components on hand. Now, a lot of manufacturers will provide dimension drawings as well as specifications for the bridges that they sell, or the tuners, or the pots, or whatever. However, I've often found over the years there can be some slight discrepancies in what's listed and what you actually get. And because we're dealing with dimensions, anywhere from 100th to 1,000th of an inch, that's really important. Those tolerances have to be maintained, and any variation can affect whether or not you can tune the guitar, intonate it, raise the strings to whatever action you need. So even though you can use those dimensions initially during your design phase, before you start to cut, carve, and sand and do all that work, it's a good idea to have those components on hand so you can double check those measurements. And if there's any variation or discrepancy, you can adjust your design to accommodate those changes, and that's going to save you a lot. And another example that I can give you with relation to the bridge is string spread from one side to the other, E to E. Oftentimes the manufacturers will tell you in their dimension drawings or their specifications what that string spread is. However, when you actually get the bridge, you may find that it can vary just ever so slightly. And of course, that will play a critical role in determining the width of your neck. So if you're really trying to nail a tight tolerance here, it's important to be able to measure that before you start to make your neck. Now, another important measurement that you need would relate to the tuners or the tuning pegs or tuning machines or whatever you want to call these things. You need to be able to measure the diameter of the shaft where the tuning machine, tuning peg, tuner fits into your headstock. And if you go by a specification that you read somewhere on the internet, there's always a chance you're going to make the hole either too small or too large. If you're lucky, you'll make it just right, but do you really want to take that chance? If you make it too small, no big deal. You just ream it out until the peg fits. However, if you make it too large, your only recourse is to either make a new neck or plug that hole and re-drill it. And that screams shoddy craftsmanship. So, you know, it's a good idea just to have these on hand so you can measure it to determine. Then there are other examples I can give as well, like the diameter of the holes to mount your switch, the diameter of the holes to mount your potentiometer, all those good things. You need to know those fairly accurately, because if you make the holes the wrong size, it's going to show in the results of the work that you've put in. And, you know, let's face it, when you're building your own guitar, you're putting a lot of work into it. So why would you want to, you know, potentially make a mistake when all you had to do was make sure you had all the components on hand when you started to make your guitar? Now, another subject related to component selection is quality, performance, and value. Now, as far as quality is concerned, all I'm going to really say is if you're going to invest a lot of time in building your own guitar, don't do it because you hope to save a lot of money, because you probably aren't. Instead, you need to focus on quality. Like I said, you're investing a lot of time. Don't do that and then equip the guitar with poor quality components. And believe me, there are a lot of junky components out there. So focus on high quality brands. Now, folks are going to probably ask me, well, who makes the best bridges and who makes the best tuners and potentiometers and capacitors? Well, there are a lot of good brands out there, and I could name names, but I'm going to try to avoid that in this particular episode with respect to quality, because every company out there has a different way of pursuing quality control on the products that they sell, and you may find some components you feel better than others. And in my experience, as long as you're sticking with some of these better quality brands, you should be safe as far as purchasing a good component for your guitar. And you have to remember, items like bridges and tuners, potentiometers, they get a lot of work, and they have to be able to withstand quite a bit of abuse. So they need to be fairly rugged and durable, and something that's going to last for the long haul. So you really want to stick with components that are made from quality materials, and that means you're going to have to do a little bit of research on your own. Now, as far as performance is concerned, an important consideration is subjectivity. If you go on to social media and look at some of the discussions, debates that people have regarding component selection, you'll notice that there are arguments all the time about who makes the best performing components. And an example is potentiometers. You'll have people who absolutely swear by CTS, other people who swear by Borns, and then other people who swear by Alpha. In truth, from a performance standpoint, there can be some subtle differences, but I think you'll find that what it comes down to is personal preference. So instead of buying a specific brand or tolerance because of what somebody on Facebook or Twitter recommended, you really have to find out for yourself which is going to work best. And one way to do that is to do some research to find out what guitar brands are using what brand potentiometers, and then head over to your local music store and try them out. See what you think. That's a little bit weird, but I think an even better way is just to simply order one of each brand and test them out yourself. They're not that expensive. You're talking a couple of bucks here. Now, there are some really expensive potentiometers out there. You know, you're going to hear terms like military spec and other BS terms like that. What I recommend is that you purchase the brands that you like and then try them out and see what you think, which one you feel is going to perform the best. You know, somebody can put a blindfold on me and hand me a potentiometer, not tell me what it is, and I can tell what it is just by turning the shaft, because that's where the main difference is. And that's really important to a lot of guitar players, is how that shaft feels when you turn the knob. Is there some resistance? Is it really easy to turn? Somewhere in between? And you'll find that that's a big issue with deciding which potentiometer to use. And of course, there are other factors such as how they roll off volume and tone, and really you just have to decide which approach you prefer. You know, audio taper, linear taper, all that kind of thing. So it's really subjective. Now, as far as, you know, items like capacitors, you'll hear terms like military spec, things like that. In fact, whenever someone says, I only use Russian military spec capacitors, I got to kind of bite my tongue or turn my head to conceal my hysterical laughter, because it's nonsense. And you'll find that when it comes to purchasing components, a lot of people will base their review or their opinion on how much money they spent. And this is true really with anything, from a, you know, $2 capacitor to a $100,000 car. The more money people spend on something, the more likely they are to just gush over how great it is, because they don't want to admit they just threw away a ton of money. And I find that's common. And, you know, I can remember when people were raving about their $25 Russian military spec capacitors. And all I can say is, you can make a pretty good sounding capacitor out of a potato. So just keep that in mind. At any rate, I hope that this video will give you some food for thought, and maybe it will spark some discussion down in the comments below about component selection. Bottom line is, my point is that you should make sure you purchase all of your parts and materials in that little window of time between when you've designed the guitar and you start to actually cut some wood. Doing so will help you avoid those horrible mistakes that can happen when you suddenly realize that a component you thought was one dimension actually turns out to be something else. So you don't want to be in a situation where the guitar that you work so hard to build can't be tuned, you can't get the action where you want it, the strings pop off the sides of the fretboard, the tuners move around, jiggle in the tuning holes on the headstock. So hopefully this video will help you to avoid that problem. And as always, I encourage you to subscribe if you don't already subscribe, especially if you enjoy watching videos about building guitars. And if you have any comments or questions, like I said, put them down below, and either I will try to answer them, or maybe somebody in the community can jump in and offer solutions. And if you would like to support my channel, head over to eguitarplans.com, purchase a plan, and that way you're supporting my efforts and getting something in return that's related to making guitars. And until the next episode, take care and I'll see you soon.